Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Danny Roseman, and I'm so happy that you all are here today. I have the pleasure of introducing someone who is talented, capable, and just a joy to speak to. Her name is Brianna Doe. She's the founder of Verbatim. She's a host of a wonderful podcast, and she's a LinkedIn creator with people who follow her. And why do they follow her? Well, because she has some interesting things to say. So thankfully, we get to have a one on one with her today and learn more about branding, social, and how to build a business that actually grows using these elements. So please join me in welcoming Brianna. And also, while you're here, you can drop in the comments where you're tuning in from, or you can drop a fire emoji if you've already completed our content optimization masterclass. I'm just curious. That's just for me. But please let us know where you're watching from, and let's welcome Brianna.
Hello. Thank you
Hello.
so much. That was the loveliest intro. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy you're here, and I know our audience is going to get so much out of this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very, very excited for this. I've been looking forward to this.
Okay, so I think we'll start off with something kind of broad and kind of work our way down from there. But um, what are the biggest shifts in consumer behavior that brands need to adapt to in 2025 and moving forward that you've seen?
Yeah, and I'd be curious what you think too. I think what I'm noticing is it's not specific to 2025, but we just have so many options, right? Like if we take our marketer hat off and put our consumer hat on, if you are looking for a new skincare brand, a new product for your tech company, like literally name the product, there's so many options for you in most of these industries. And so what we're seeing is what I consider like a bit of an oversaturation of content and ads and just options. And so the way to diversify, the way to differentiate isn't through just pricing. It's through actually building trust and building some level of a community that your consumers and buyers want to partake in and want to participate in. And so with that comes a level of trust and level of personalization that we can't really just manufacture, right? It has to be authentic. And so in 2025 specifically, I think a lot more brands are kind of opening their eyes to that. It's not just about, you know, throwing a couple of social posts up once a month or, maybe hosting like a pop-up event every so often, but it's really about curating the space for your buyers to feel like they're part of something and feel like they're investing in a brand that truly understands them and truly listens to them.
Yeah, because with all of these options, standing out is harder than ever, and people really do want to feel like they're not just making like a humanless exchange when it comes to this stuff. They want to feel like you said, like they're part of something. Makes
Exactly. And I
sense.
think too, even so, I used to work in sustainability a lot, and there was the stat that was always thrown around about like, if you break it down by generation, like Gen Z and millennials care, statistically a lot more about like working with or investing in brands that really center around sustainability and sustainable practices, sustainable, working environments, all of that. And so that's a perfect example, I think, of people at this point, they typically, or in most situations, want to know their money is going somewhere good. They don't just care about the product and if it's high quality, but the person who created the product or the engineer that's building it, like, are they being treated fairly? How is the company like showing up in, this very interesting climate that we're in? So I think it's just really important to make sure that your brand actually reflects what your consumers are looking for.
Thank you for that. So it's funny you mentioned that because, like you said, now, especially like Gen Z and millennials, they want to know where their money is going. They want to get a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain. But that brings me to my next question of how much transparency is too much transparency when we're talking about brands using the internet? Is there a way that they're oversharing? What would that look like? What would the consequences be? But yeah, my question is how much transparency is too much when you're trying to build a respectable but also a relatable brand?
Yeah, that's an incredible question. And I think the hard part about it is that the goalpost is always moving and the way we define too much transparency or not enough transparency is always changing. And I think what also makes it more difficult is that the answer is going to vary by person, right? What one person considers to be too much transparency from a brand that they're buying from, another one's going to be like, no, I love this. I love how much I'm learning about, you know, their working environments, how they build their products, things like that. And so I think it's going to depend on your industry, on your target audience, what they're looking for. And I think that's where, in 2025, that's what a lot of brands are opening their eyes to, is it's not just about what the CEO thinks we should say, or where the CEO thinks we should show up online, or what the CEO thinks we should talk about. It's what are our buyers and prospective buyers actually looking for? What are they interested in? How do they show up online? Who do they trust? And then making sure that we're emulating and modeling that. And that, in my opinion, is going to be the easiest way to not mess up in this area, because it can be hard to come back from. But know that you're building something for your brand, not just for anybody out there.
Yeah, so what would that look like in practical terms? Like from my experience, I've been really into the videos of behind the scenes of like building the products.
Mm-hmm.
So how the things like the factory lines and like what it looks like in the actual day to day of the workers who are doing the stuff. I prefer more of that than say spats arguing online. Like, yeah, that's relatable, but it's not necessarily what you want your brand to be associated with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that's a great point too. Like, there's so much, like I said, oversaturation of content. There's so many ways that we can show up online as a brand. But the question to ask is this something I want to align our brand to? Like, what message are we putting out there for the brand? So to your example about behind the scenes content, the brands that are putting out like behind the scenes content and showing how they're made, or, kind of pulling back the curtain and showing the team behind the product, they've probably started doing that through experimentation. So you have to test different types of content. You won't always know immediately what's going to work and what won't. But even with behind the scenes content, my hypothesis or my guess is that as they were building that content and strategizing about it, they were asking, like, how do we want to show up online? What message is this showing? Is there anything that we don't want to communicate or don't want to be taken the wrong way? And so I think the name of the game is experimentation. Like, first you do the work to understand your customers. You talk to your CS team, you talk to customers themselves or clients. And then that's how you start building, I would consider like safe tests or safe experiments. But you have to give those experiments time to actually grow and see results. You can't just test it once. So try different types of content, listen to like the comments and the engagement that you're getting online, and then you can start building off of that.
So what I'm hearing is safe experiments. So after you've done research, after you've actually gotten to know who you're trying to talk to, a bit of time. It's not going to happen from one day to the next. So you give it time to see if it works or not, and then adjust, hopefully quickly, if that's the case.
Yeah. And then see what's also working online in general, right? Because if you have done the research and okay, our target audience like lives on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn. That's where we want to focus. Okay, what other brands are they engaging with? Right? We don't live in a silo. So like, what other brands they're engaging with? What content creators they engage with? What kind of content are they interested in? That can also really help as you're trying to strategize about content.
Nice. So I'm chronically online. I live there. I'm there more than I care to admit. And I saw this.
Same,
I saw this
same.
post. I saw this post recently that had me chuckling because it was like, has anyone realized that so many brands have adopted this slay, yes, the boots house down, like BFF kind of language? And it's like all of
Yeah.
these big brands that never spoke like that have adopted this similar kind of language online when trying to reach their customers. Almost to the point
Yeah.
where you might even be able to put two of these side by side, take away the actual name of the brand, and be confused as to who's talking. So,
Yeah.
yes, we want to be relatable. Yes, we want to be personable. But do you have any advice for companies who are looking to form and create a personal voice in the midst of all of this?
Okay, it's so funny you say that because I am also chronically online. I'm seeing this a lot on TikTok. I don't know if you're on TikTok, but like when a post blows up and you see just dozens of companies in there, and it's like, I actually can't tell the difference between any of these brands. Like, they all sound the same. And I think it's interesting because it used to sway to the other side of the pendulum or spectrum, right? Like, everything was very corporate, very, I don't want to use the word robotic, but just very corporate, a little bland, if we're going to be honest. Like, there just wasn't much personality in it. And so now it feels like brands are swinging the other way. And the thing is, so many brands are swinging the other way, right? And so to your point, it's hard to tell a difference sometimes. And I think I do believe, spicy take, I think as marketers, we heard people say to us, like, be more relatable, be more human, be more personal. And we took that and ran with it. And then we saw like the BFF slay queen, like OMG language really working for certain brands. And it's fun online, right? It's funny. But is that the kind of messaging or like brand voice that your audience connects to, or is it just relatable to people in general? And I think kind of what I alluded to earlier with, it shouldn't just be about what the CEO thinks is good content. It's, are we speaking this way? Have we adopted this brand voice because it's like viral right now and trendy and popular, or because it actually reflects who our brand is? And so I think one of the best ways to approach this is, if you've already started adopting this voice, take a step back and look at who's engaging with your content. Like, is it your ICP? Is it your target audience? Now, if it's not, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to just, drop everything, redo all your brand guidelines. Maybe it's like the posts that you're showing up on and engaging on. There could be multiple factors, but look at who's engaging with it, and how they're engaging. If you're not really seeing your ICP at all, there's something in there, there's a story in there that we need to start to unpack. And then look at content from brands that your ICP is engaging with and see what the difference is. Not to say that you need to adopt their brand voice, but it can just be a really interesting litmus test to see if you're on the right track with it, because the whole point is differentiation, right? I keep saying it. I mean, I feel like I talk about it all the time, but there is just this oversaturation of content, and it is harder and harder to differentiate yourself. So if we all shifted from the corporate voice to, bestie at brunch voice, and it doesn't fit your brand, that's not going to help either. And I think when it comes to building community and like becoming top of mind for your buyer, it's not just about sounding like everybody else or doing what's trendy. It's about actually understanding them and what they're looking for and what they relate and connect to, and then adjusting appropriately.
Like it is tempting. No, it is tempting to
It
kind of
is.
join in that because, all the cool kids are doing it. But I think part of the original appeal was that it was so shocking and new and rare when it started happening. Like when I first saw Wendy's being sassy on the internet, I was like, okay, Wendy's, or like, okay, Eggo Waffles. Like I didn't expect to see you in this space. But like now it's,
Great.
like you said, a bit oversaturated. So I think it is worth having a long, hard think about what this means for your brand specifically, because not everyone's going to have the same reach or impact as like a Duolingo or a Wendy's or a what have you when they're in these comment sections. So you might
Yeah,
get drowned out anyway.
that's a great point too. And to be clear, I think it's fun. Like, I like seeing comments like that, and I like seeing how these brands show up. But you're right. Like, it's the Wendy's, the Duolingos, it's the Eggo waffles, it's the Ollipops. Like, it works for the brand, and they also have, I would assume they have pretty large teams, right? That can then like take this brand voice and just spread it across the internet. You can still succeed without sounding just like these larger brands. You can operate with fewer resources. You can operate with a smaller team. You don't have to match their brand voice. And I think, take this with a grain of salt, but there are ways that you can still like inject personality and inject humor into your content while still sounding like, well, while still having your own brand voice.
Totally, totally. Just making sure on the chat, are you able to hear me? Am I loud enough? Just let me know. I'm seeing your comments. I'm looking all over these. I feel like I'm driving a spaceship at the moment. I'm like, yes, okay. But I hope you all can hear me. It says I'm in the green. And if I see red, then I'll back up. But okay, so moving on to my next question for you, Brianna. From your experience working with brands, what marketing strategies are delivering real results today in this climate?
Yeah, it's so this will be a bit of a broad answer, but what I'm seeing work really well is influencer marketing. So, to be clear, I am not saying throw a ton of money at mega influencers and blow your whole budget, but anywhere from like micro to mega influencers. Brands are starting to experiment with this a lot more, especially in B2B. Um, With B2B specifically, we're seeing more of a focus on partnering with like thought leaders and industry leaders. It's not necessarily about, you know, just throwing money at a ton of different people. So influencer marketing's been a big one. You can start small, start with just a couple creators or thought leaders, start to see what's working and what's not. That one's been big. And I would also say, I'm curious if you've seen this, but I've seen brands start to, they're on multiple channels, right? Like they have a presence, but they're focusing on specific ones. I'm seeing this a lot with smaller teams, like not like the Wendy's and Lingos, but shifting their focus from just being everywhere all the time to really niching down to a couple channels, which I think is incredibly smart. One, from a marketing perspective, and two, from a bandwidth perspective. I think teams are able to really invest their energy and their focus into the channels that they know work, right? Instead of having to spread themselves too thin. So I think that's been incredibly useful and it's worth taking a look at as a brand. And then I would also say more, it kind of ties into influencer marketing, but more like co-created content, which I think is really cool. It's not just about brands creating their content in a silo, like just a blog post or just a newsletter, right? But they're partnering with other brands, leaders in the space, thought leaders, creators, and creating more of this like holistic experience for their audience, which I think is really cool.
The first thing my brain just kept screaming, ordinary eggs, the ordinary eggs is like, did you see that
I
recently?
just heard about this. Yes.
Yeah,
I
that's
was
like
so
the
shocked.
opposite of a silo. It's like the ordinary, the skincare company, and then it's like, oh, we have an egg crisis in the US. Okay, let's make some eggs, and they're ordinary eggs, and it's just like, wow, okay, crossover you didn't expect.
Right.
Okay, so not giving into the temptation or the FOMO that you need to be everywhere all the time and allowing your team to kind of make more deliberate choices about where to show up when it comes to socials. Yeah.
Yeah. So to be clear too, like I think I alluded to this, but I would still make sure you have reserved your brand name on every channel and you can repurpose content if you'd like. But when it comes to sitting down and building out like a full-fledged content and social strategy, that's when I've seen them pick like 2 to 3 channels at most, which I think is just really, yeah, I just think it's a really, really good use of resources. Because most teams, if we're being honest, we don't have Wendy's budget. I've never had a team like the size of Wendy's, and so I think making sure you're adjusting for the resources that you have.
And I feel like I'm going to get to this. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I got a little excited. But choosing these platforms, you're measuring it based on where you know your audience is or where you're seeing results. Like what is it like the chicken or the egg first? Is it like I'm going to go to LinkedIn because I hope my audience is there, or is it you just have to go and test and then see that they're responding to you on LinkedIn and that's how you know that you should be investing there?
So we're talking about brands that haven't really started on social yet.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you haven't really started on social, there are a couple different ways to go about this. I would start doing like channel research. So to your point, get on LinkedIn and see if that is just where your audience is. Chances are they are, to be honest. But start with LinkedIn, see if your audience is there, and then also just see where they're engaging in other places. And then what I would do is do like a strategic, I mean, 6 to 8 month test. Curious what you think, but like a 6 to 8 month test. Okay, we're going to focus on LinkedIn and Instagram, or like LinkedIn and TikTok. And like this is our strategy for both. We're gonna, leverage like our CEO's personal page on LinkedIn and the company page on TikTok and really go hard on those two. These are the results that we're trying to track, you know, and then just like keep an eye on the results from there along the way, but really measure success. And then at the end of that test, decide if you're in the right place. That's how I would kind of break out of the chicken and the egg situation. But that's, yeah. What do you think?
For those of my fellow impatient friends and fellows out there who heard 6 to 8 months and then like died a little inside, can you justify the 6 to 8 months? Because for me, I'm like, oh, a quarter, that's nice and neat. Why do you think 6 to 8 months is a good time range in your experience?
So, and like I said earlier, you can still have your brand name on other channels and repurpose if you'd like. I just wouldn't put the bulk of your content creation resources to the other channels. And maybe I'm jaded, but I think so. What I would typically say in the past is yes, a quarter. And then by the time we actually start getting content approved, we're like a month and a half into the quarter and we're just starting. So that's why I think it's just best to say 1 to 2 quarters, which puts us at about 6 months. Um, because it's going to take time. You're going to be doing the research first. Let's be for real. You're going to have like the red tape, most likely, where even, your C suite, your CMO, your manager just wants to see all the content first, make sure like the brand voice is on point. And by the time you start posting, it's halfway through. So that's why I think you should just be prepared to run the experiment for a bit longer. And you also don't want to put yourself under any pressure to rush the results. Like you might decide halfway through the experiment, we want to start running some paid ads too and see what kind of traffic that drives. Like there are just so many factors as you start to see what's working and what's not that can help you shift along the way. So giving yourself ample time to do that. I know 6 months sounds like a long time, but in the world of social, I would say it's going to go by pretty quickly.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make you
I
feel better? I know it's a long time.
so 6 8 months. No, I do. I do feel better. So as quickly as this whole social media world changes, it's hard to let go of things that we thought were working because they worked once or twice and we're like, okay, well, this is my thing now. This is what we're gonna do. I mean, I'm talking, you know, speaking in complete hashtags in a caption, putting a link in an Instagram caption, or like, using crazy filters on Instagram reels because it was at one point something that brought in attention and attraction, and sometimes it's hard to let go of these things. So are there any outdated branding tactics or tactics that on socials that you think brands who want to stay relevant now should let go of for their own good?
That is a great question. The hard part with social is that you have to have you have to have a long attention span in the sense that you have to play the long game with building on there, but you have to have a short memory. So you can't be married to any of your ideas or trends. I think we all see the Instagram updates being released. It feels like every 72 hours, which is awesome. Working in social. Thank you so much. So I would say, hmm, you know what? I spicy take maybe. I don't know how people feel about this. I would say focusing too much on the aesthetic of your grid on Instagram. Like that used to be a really big thing. Maybe I'm dating myself, but I feel like brands are still doing that and they're focusing so much on just like how it looks when you click on Instagram. But there's a focus on the content now. Like you are going to have their attention for like this long. And then you really have to make sure that you're entertaining or educating or informing or whatever the case may be. So, yes, having brand guidelines, great. Like make sure all of it's cohesive and your brand guidelines are reflected on each channel cohesively, but don't focus so much on just the aesthetic. Focus on the meat of the content that you're creating.
So you don't have to have a perfectly curated pastel, either like one picture, one square, one text, like type of grid anymore. No, people aren't so invested in that. They care more about like the meat, the content that's behind it.
Yeah, I mean, it still looks cool. Like if you have the bandwidth to make sure that it also looks really cool, that's awesome. And I'm not saying abandon your guidelines or like if pastel colors are part of your guidelines, keep doing that. I'm just saying the focus doesn't have to be on just how it looks as a grid. Like as people, if you think about the way you scroll online, right? If you're just looking and you see a brand post and then you keep going and then you see a brand post and then maybe you see another one from the first one, so you go click, you might think, "Ooh, that looks cool." Then you immediately click on a piece of content. You're not just going to sit and analyze the grid. So I think that's something that's crucial. I actually had a client who that was their main focus. Every time we drafted their content calendar, they wanted to see a mock-up of how it would look on the grid. And so there's a balance, right? Like yes, aesthetically pleasing, but also not driving any real metrics or KPIs for us.
Indeed, yeah, it's easy to get distracted by those things because again,
Yeah.
it seems like it's a quick win, but how big is the win actually, right? How much are people actually paying attention to that? Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we mentioned the word oversaturated a couple times in our short talk so far, and I want to come back to it. It's just the truth. There's just a lot of noise. There's a lot happening. How can businesses differentiate themselves without feeling like they have to constantly rely on discounts, promos, or viral trend hopping, or other sorts of promotions. I mean, it really is about finding what works for your brand. Like, I don't know if your brand needs to be doing the latest TikTok dance to get noticed. That may not work for you. But what are other ways that you can find to differentiate yourself if you're a company?
So I think the first thing to do, actually, which might sound counterintuitive, is to take a step back and sit down with your team, if you have one, and align on what success looks like. Like what are the business goals that we are trying to optimize our social or just online presence for? And then how does content and social play a role in that? Because what you'll do there is you'll get aligned on what that looks like. And the goal is that the next time a viral trend pops up that isn't really aligned with anything your brand is doing, and it would be kind of a stretch to participate, you can go back to that alignment conversation that you had and make sure that you're still on track and use that as justification to focus on the goals that you'd already set out, or the strategy or the post, or whatever the case may be. So that's what I actually recommend first. The hardest part for me, especially earlier in my career, was a trend would pop up, right? And we had a content calendar already planned. We had our strategy laid out, and my manager would come to me and say, "Hey, have you seen this? Like, let's hop on this." I'd be like, "Well, we're a vacuum company, so I don't know if we need to, participate in this." And so there are going to be times when the trend makes sense. Like, that viral moment is something that you should pivot and adjust to, and you know, the other content can wait. But it just helps to make sure that the whole team is on the same page at the beginning, so you can have those harder conversations, make them a little easier along the way. So that's the first step. Um, from there, yeah, it's interesting. Like, I look, as a consumer, I love a promo. Okay, I love a sale. I'm sure you do too. I love a promotion, but there are also a lot of those too. And to your point, that's not always the best way to differentiate anymore. You could be having a sale 40% off, so is your competitor. So what's your actual differentiator? Because it's not necessarily going to be pricing, right? And I think for a lot of brands, it is more about like how you're showing up, and it sounds like a buzzword, and I'll break it down, but like how authentically you're showing up too. Like, are you creating the space where your buyers have a deeper understanding, or have the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of what your brand stands for, the team behind the product, like what they're investing in, or what they're giving their money to, and how it will impact like the society around them, or the people around them, and that can look different depending on your industry, and depending on your buyer's makeup. But when you start building your strategy, your digital or online strategy, I think it's really important to ask yourself not just like what business goals are we optimizing for, but like who are we trying to be online? Like, if I build a whole strategy for a brand, the question I'm going to ask is, when a buyer comes and looks at our TikTok and then our LinkedIn and then our Instagram and then our website, or an ad, or whatever the customer journey looks like, if somebody were to ask them, what do you think this brand is and why do you buy from them? I want them to be able to have a really clear answer, whether it's they made me feel seen, they really celebrate inclusivity, I know their products are high quality, and they just have really sustainable or transparent business practices, things like that. Like, I think, taking my marketer hat off again, I want to know like where companies' money is going. Like, I want to know that I want to know where the ingredients in the products that I'm buying are coming from. I want to know how, if it's a B2B company, like B2B SaaS, I want to know not just how this tech or tool will help me in the short term, but how I can also communicate the value, like, to my manager, to the C-suite. And so I think giving your customer the resources to answer the questions that will solve their major pain points, whatever those look like, I think that's the way that you differentiate. That was a very long-winded answer, but I'm curious
No,
what you
no,
think.
no. I like when you said like you could be having a 40% off sale, but so could your competitor. Like, that's not enough anymore. It's not enough anymore. And this is kind of off script, but I'm kind of curious. You run an agency. There are many agencies in the world. Why do you think people come to your agency specifically?
Ooh, I love that question. Um, I think they come to the agency to work with me. So, for context, I don't do any outbound or like paid advertising to advertise verbatim. I post on LinkedIn and I do like speaking engagements on stage and stuff, and that's it. So my main pipeline drivers are organic LinkedIn content and honestly word of mouth referrals. It's probably like 75% LinkedIn, 25% word of mouth. Um, and what I find interesting is that on LinkedIn, I don't talk about marketing all the time. I actually talk a lot more about like my thoughts on leadership, like how to become a stronger or more inclusive leader, or like marketing as a whole, like how are we looking or breaking down the customer journey. But I don't really get into the weeds of this is what I'm really good at. Like here are the 5 things that I do well and how I do them every day. I focus a lot more on just who I am as a person and what shapes the way I work and think and live. And what I've found is that I Verbatim has a website. We have case studies on the site. There's plenty of social proof. It's very clear on there what we do and who we do it for. The missing piece on the site is who I am. And that's where the LinkedIn content comes in. And so I think when people come to work with Verbatim, when I tell them during like the discovery call, I'll be your main point of contact, you're going to work directly with me, like that's when their eyes kind of light up because there are so many agencies. And I think we all want to work with people that we like and people whose values align with our own. And I think that's why our clients work with us and stay with us.
Yeah, I went off script for that. I'm just curious because I mean,
No, it's,
I think it's relevant. We're talking about the fact that people have a lot of choices. They have a lot of choices, and we're talking
yeah,
about differentiators, And I wanted to know, well, you know what a differentiator is for others, obviously, and I wanted to know how you would express your own for your own agency. So I think that's an
yeah.
excellent question.
Yeah. And I think that's no, I love that question. And I was actually thinking about that a couple of weeks ago because first of all, like one of the main things we do is influencer marketing for B2C and B2B. And there are plenty of B2B influencer marketing agencies popping up, especially right now. Like they are popping up like every day. And so that differentiator, like I see them talking about the founders like talk about influencer marketing a lot online and all of that. And I really don't. Like on LinkedIn, I just don't really discuss it. But our pipeline is still really healthy. And so I was actually sitting down and breaking that down a couple of weeks ago. And I think, yeah, I'm probably repeating myself, but the differentiator is just, I think, knowing who the founder is that you're working with. After you know that I'm already good at what I do, like that next step is knowing, is this somebody that I want to spend 2 hours a week with on strategy calls, or should I go with another company?
Yeah, I actually had a question for you about how to balance when it comes to energy investment, company page versus founder or CEO or personal profiles. Um, in your experience, I mean, obviously, yeah, you are founder and personal, but the where should people be putting the majority of their energy for LinkedIn specifically? I'm thinking,
For LinkedIn.
yeah,
Okay. So for LinkedIn specifically, it seems so counterintuitive, but LinkedIn really doesn't like prioritize driving reach for company pages. Now we do see company pages that have broken out of that, right? HubSpot's a great example. Like they have a really thriving corporate page. But what I think is cool about LinkedIn is that there is such an emphasis on the personal front, like having it doesn't have to be your founder. I think it's probably the best idea if it is, but like your founder, CEO, C suite, people at the company, like when they start creating content, um, it's just a lot easier to get reach and to actually drive engagement and start to connect. And I think part of it too is that with company pages, you can't connect with people literally, like you can't send connection requests, you can't follow people. And so the prioritizing that like human to human connection. So what I would recommend is making sure, just like every other channel, like make sure you have your brand page, like your company page on LinkedIn, and you can still use it. I would say maybe like 5% of your resources, maybe. You can do a lot of repurposing from other channels, but I would focus the bulk of your efforts and bandwidth on LinkedIn, like picking a couple of folks at the company. Um, the higher up, the better, because they're, especially if it's founder, they're going to be there for a while, right? And then really developing their voice on there and helping them like build engagement and build a presence.
I like that little aside of they're going to be there for a while. I think, yeah, it would really be unfortunate to have someone who had a really high turnover rate and they had someone put all of this investment into the company with their personal profile and then they take all of that with them when they go. And it's just like no longer
Right.
useful.
It's like that's awkward. And also too, like I think, I talk to creators about this sometimes. I get asked the question, like, how do I balance like propping up my company that I work for, that they just work for, that they haven't founded, but also making sure that I'm building my personal brand so it's about me. And essentially the goal there, or the objective, is if or when they leave that company, they don't want people to see them as Jane from Google, right? Like they want to see them as just Jane who now works somewhere else. So I think it's a harder line to walk for somebody that's not like as deeply embedded into the brand.
Ask me how many times I've said I'm Danny from Server. This has become a part of my name. Hi, I'm Danny from Server. Danny
I
from
love
Server
it though.
here.
I support it.
So, we have a variety of social media platforms to choose from. More and more popping up. What factors should businesses consider when selecting a primary social media platform? In your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, okay, first things first, there are many social media platforms, like you said. Your audience probably isn't like just on one. Most likely, it depends on your audience, but generally speaking, they're probably not just on one. But where are they like who do they trust? I would say is a great thing to consider. Like what other creators or brands, and then where are they showing up? Like on which channels? I think is really really helpful information. Um, because then what you can do is start to analyze like each platform accordingly. So, for example, I worked for a CNC company, which is like the industrial CNC, where you can basically you can create like cabinets, tables, things like that. CNC machinery company, and the audience, our audience was cabinet makers, so it was B2B, but the cabinet makers were not on every platform. Okay, first of all, most of them still didn't use like any sort of digital storage systems. They were using like notepads and stuff for that was their CRM. So when we sat down and thought about their social media platforms and where to show up online, we quickly realized it was like Instagram and Facebook. They weren't really on Twitter. They weren't the demographic we were looking for was not really on TikTok, but they were actually actively scrolling on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram especially because they were following quite a few other cabinet makers. Once we started looking at certain creators that they were more prone to follow and engage with, we realized those creators were also on YouTube. And so that led to the next channel that we started to really dive into. Um, so yeah, that's the main factor to consider, I would say, especially if you're starting from scratch. Like where is your audience already existing? Like what is their water cooler? I think as marketers, sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, we want to like just create the community where we want to create the community. Like I want to try like building like a Discord community, right? Or I want to get us on TikTok. But it can't just be more of an uphill battle. I think it's better to focus on the quick wins, the low hanging fruit, kind of leverage, you know, the win of being where the audience already is.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you, just because I'm a TikTok girly does not mean my audience is going to be all on TikTok. And as much as I want them to be there, I could put all the best content I have, give them my best, but they're not going to find it because they're not there. So it's about first really understanding your ICP, really understanding where they go. And then once you're there, a bit of observation, a bit of like, okay, now who, besides us, hopefully, who are they following? Who are they engaging with? And then seeing where those people are. So it's kind of like following the breadcrumbs a little bit. And if that leads you to another platform, say YouTube, then you know that's your next step too. Yeah?
Yes, exactly. Because I think, okay, if we want to break it down, the question I would ask is where are buyers or consumers um, absorbing information? Where are they going to learn? And then where are they going for entertainment? Like those are probably going to be the two main things that they're online for, right? As it relates to your brand. And so that can be, it just might not be where you think it is.
I like I like that point of catching them on both sides of like
Yeah.
where they're learning, where they're going to learn, and when they're like have their thinking cap on, and then like where they go to just kind of brain rot, enjoy, find pleasure, engage and things like that. Because I was thinking about myself, and it is different. I don't necessarily go to
Yeah.
TikTok to learn. I may learn something while I'm there, but I don't go there when I'm trying to learn. Whereas when I'm trying to learn something, I may go hang out with ChatGPT. I may go type in some questions, get some answers there. Maybe go like throw back to Wikipedia, see what's up over there. But like,
Hey.
I'm not like I wouldn't just go hang out in a Wikipedia forum. I wouldn't just go. I understand what you're saying. Okay, perfect.
Right, exactly.
Good, good. So, we touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can just summarize it for the people out there. Um, should every brand be on multiple platforms? I think you mentioned reserving your name or your brand's username on those platforms, and then is it better to focus on just one or two? And I think I want to try to sum it up, but if I miss it, let me know. But you mentioned keeping in mind the size of your team and your team's capacity as well. Not everyone has these huge budgets or a huge amount of resources in order to just show up equally everywhere. So by doing the tests, seeing how things perform, and then kind of adjusting from there. But it is, I think, a starting point to make sure, especially if your brand name is slightly common, popular, making sure that you reserve that, because you never know, you may end up back there, and in the future.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just to reiterate, reserve your brand name and lean into content repurposing for the channels that you're not going to, you know, shift as much of your focus to. So you can still have some sort of presence. But when it comes to like content creation, full content strategy, like where are we focusing in our day to day, that's where I would lean into a couple channels. And I know that that's very nuanced. It does depend on the size of your team. It does depend on, where your audience is. But I just think it's really important to, most teams just aren't the Duolingos of the world, or the Wendy's, and just making sure that you're giving your team the space to really do good work is important. And if you can't give them more resources, like build a team, which is fine, letting them do their best work is going to mean narrowing your focus.
I just want to point out that sometimes team is generous. Team might just be
Yeah.
two people and a prayer, right? Like one person and like three iPads. Like team can be very limiting at times. So it's funny you mentioned repurposing. So I think what Brianna's saying is just because you're not active every single day on one of your secondary or tertiary platforms doesn't mean you should completely ignore it. It's not just reserve your brand name and then like forget it exists. And she mentioned content repurposing, which is perfect because you can design your content for the platform that you know is going to bring you the returns that you're looking for. And then you can take that bits, pieces, shift it, mold it slightly, just a little bit of tweaks, and then put that and use that on other platforms. So again, it's not taking up so much of your time and so much of your effort. And shameless plug, not shameless plug. We do have we do have a feature that we've released inside of our content editor that will allow for content repurposing for social media. So imagine you've written an article within the content editor. You can now click a cute little button and then have that information be repurposed for a social post. So again, it's saving your team's time because teams are tired. Teams are tired.
Yeah.
And if you can still show up in there and still show up on your main platform like the way you want to, and also just kind of with a few clicks of a button or a few tweaks, show up on a different platform, even better, because you don't lose that
Well,
momentum.
exactly. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And somebody in the comments made a good point. I don't know if I actually said this out loud, but reserving your brand name is also important so that nobody else takes it. I think we saw this, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we saw this on Twitter. Wasn't there this like weird point where people were like taking brand names because they were available and then you could just like buy the verification check mark so it looked like the official brand? That's a worst case scenario, but the point is just make sure you reserve your brand names.
I saw that. It was unhinged.
You saw that? Okay. I feel like that happened.
Can we have a question in the comment? Can you please define ICP?
Oh, yeah. So ICP is just ideal customer profile. It's essentially like who is your perfect customer or client, and then understanding what makes up that customer, like what their pain points are, their challenges, the goals they're trying to reach, where they show up online, things like that.
It's a
location,
it's a
etc.
deep dive. It should be a deep dive
It is.
into like what they're interested in, where they spend their time. Again, where do they go for fun? Where do they go to brain rot? Are they going to TikTok? Are they going to YouTube? Like, are they still on Facebook? Like, what are they doing? Like, it's a deep, deep,
Yeah.
deep dive into your ideal customer, so that you can go to where they are and then begin your process of reaching them. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's move on. Um, I never thought that I would be so face fronting, front facing for a company, considering
Right.
how introverted I am. I never thought that I would be on social media creating videos and things like that, and these type. I love it. I'm here. We're happy, but I never
Hey.
thought of that. If traditional social media is not your jam, if you don't want to have a face fronting presence on social media, but you know it's important for your brand to have presence on social media, how do how do you go about building a personal brand when you know you're not really keen on social?
So, question here: are we talking about? I feel like there are two audiences I could speak to, like the marketers that work at the company that are creating content or showing up online for the brand, or the founder slash CEO.
Can we do both?
Yeah. So, okay, maybe a spicy take. Also, I love the way you show up online, so ignore this because I want you to continue doing it. But marketers, I think there is a difference between, if we just take like the simplest version of the titles, like social media manager. Let's say that's the person who's supposed to show up and like be front facing online. I'm also introverted, and there were roles I was in where I was managing social, where I was also expected to be the face of the company, and I just said absolutely not, because that is not what you hired me for. Also, I don't want to be online. Like, I don't, at this point, do not put me in front of a camera. Do you know what I mean? So I think social media manager, the person building the strategy, managing social, growing the accounts, doesn't necessarily have to be the person in front of the camera when you're creating content. I do see those as two different skill sets. Um, and so if budget or bandwidth or resources allow, I would recommend bringing in a content creator, who can then also just focus on content creation, like videos, etc. So that's an option. It's one thing I would do. Um, if that is not an option, I think there are other ways to go about it instead of just being the face of the company. Like, you could make it more of a one, you can make it more of a team effort, right? So if you happen to have a team, and that's not limited to marketing, if you just have a team in general and there are ways to incorporate them into the content, I think that's a really cool way to then also diversify like who your audience is seeing online. And then this third option, this is where co-created content really comes in handy. So partnering with content creators, influencers, other brands to create content is a really cool way to kind of build up that content repository and also not have to be the only one out there. Um, and then fourth and final, maybe you just like don't need that kind of content. I think it does depend on your audience, and how you want to connect with them. And there could be ways you might have to get creative, but there could be ways to create content that doesn't require that. Maybe you invest the money or resources to just have like hire, I don't want to say models because that's the wrong term, but like hire people to create content. You have like a literal studio day where you shoot videos, and then that's what you use to repurpose and edit and distribute content. So I think there are multiple ways for marketers, but I do think I am starting to see this a lot in job descriptions where like the social media manager is building the strategy, managing the social accounts, managing the community, and then also handling all the content creation. And whether or not you want to be the front facing person, it can also be a bandwidth conversation. Like, just do you have the time to do all of it? So, what do you think about that part before I move to founders? Because, like I said, ignore it. I love your content. So.
Yeah, I think I've seen that conversation a lot with social media managers expected to be like on camera talent, like strategists behind the scenes, the organizing everything. I think outsourcing it to, like you mentioned, hiring a team to do it can be helpful. I do think it might lose some of the brand because you may associate their faces with it, and like they're not necessarily affiliated with the brand completely unless you have some sort of exclusivity with that
Right.
outsource like
That's a good point.
if it's not in-house is what I mean. But I think the best thing would be to, if your social person isn't able to do that and it's like a bandwidth thing, or just they're just not interested in that, bringing it in-house. I think that's the safest thing for me, like hiring in-house talent that focuses on that, because otherwise it can get a little bit tricky if you see a face that you would normally would associate with this company and then they're doing something for a different company and you're like, wait, what? I thought they were doing that one. You know what I'm
But
saying?
yeah, my question with that too, though, is if it's like, okay, so like I said, I was a social media manager at a few different companies earlier in my career, and I'm not with those companies anymore. So I think like I get what you're saying, and I do agree. Best case scenario, you bring it in house, but that person can still leave the company. So you aren't
True.
necessarily like mitigating that risk fully, but the risk is a lot lower if they're in house as opposed to just hiring a content creator who also is a content creator for six other brands. So
Yeah.
it's, there are pros and cons, I think.
Yeah.
That which is a perfect segue actually to why you could also, fifth option, focus on your founder and have them create the content. But with founders, it's a tricky one. So I understand not wanting to be, creating content and building a personal brand. One, you're busy, you're building the company. Two, that you didn't necessarily get into building this business to create content or to build a personal brand. You did it to further whatever mission your company has. Um, but it is an incredible way to stand out and to help people associate like the values, the perspectives and beliefs that you share online with the company that you're building. Um, and it doesn't have to be what this doesn't have to look like is spending 3 hours a day on LinkedIn every day, creating content, engaging, commenting, posting videos. Like, I think what's really important is understanding how you want to show up online, what you want to talk about, what you want to be known for, and what you want your brand to be known for, and then just being really deliberate and intentional with your time. So, like, what can I realistically do per week? Maybe it's 3 posts a week, and maybe one is video, or one per month is video, or none, but trying to figure out like what formats can work for you, what cadence can work for you, getting help from your marketing team on this to help like kind of just pull out your voice a bit and help you create content that resonates, one, with yourself, and two, with the audience that you're trying to build. um, when I talk to founders who say like that's just not really my thing or I don't really want to do it, when I dig into it, it's typically one of those things. It's bandwidth, not sure what to do, or like don't want to be on video. And there are ways, I think, to tackle all three. You just have to be willing to carve out some time for it, even if it's an hour a week.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Someone left a comment. Too many companies have ridiculous expectations of what one person can, um, what one person can be expected to do, especially with the time that they have. Yeah, octopus mode.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was trying to say it really nicely, but it's just like I think expectations are just a little, they're getting a little out of control. And I think especially with, the job market that we're seeing, that we've been seeing, and teams are getting cut, and marketing teams typically are smaller than they need to be. Like, I think as marketers, we typically have a lot on our plates in the first place. Then our team gets cut in half, but we're expected to do more. It's a lot, and I think it's what I was alluding to with focusing on certain channels, just
Yeah.
narrowing your focus. It's also being able to narrow the work that you're doing so you can do it really well, because that's how you're going to drive results.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to take 1 second to let everyone know who's watching. Please leave your questions if you have any in the chat so that we can address them. We're going to be winding down shortly. I just have a couple more questions for Brianna, and then I will happily turn my head to the chat to see what you guys have to say. All right, so leave those there. If you're still here and you're awake and you're happy, you can also drop an emoji. I love those. But yes, please leave your questions and your comments there. If you're liking it, also let us know. Okay? All right, so my question for you, Rihanna. you, what do you wish you knew about building a personal brand before amassing 200,000 followers on LinkedIn? Like you can't even turn your head in the morning without like 200,000 people are
Oh
tapped
my
in
gosh.
as to what you have to say. So, what do you wish you knew? How'd you do it? What you knew? What would you tell yourself before you started all of this?
Ooh. Okay. I wish I knew. I wish I knew that I didn't have to like do it how everybody else is doing or build it how everybody else tells you to build a personal brand before I started. That's very general, so I'll break it down. Like when I first started posting on LinkedIn almost 3 years ago, I kept hearing advice like you have to post 4 times a week, actually closer to seven, like try and post every day, comment on different posts for like an hour or two, make sure you don't edit your post within the first hour, and then make sure you're like, it was just, the advice was a lot. You just get a lot of advice. And I think for anybody who's on LinkedIn, you're probably still seeing this. There's this whole like, you know, corner of LinkedIn where they just teach you how to do LinkedIn well. And there is helpful advice in there. But what I wish I'd known from the very beginning is that I can just take what works and leave the rest. It took me a little bit of time to learn that. Um, I The whole point of a personal brand is that it's personal, you know, and it's all about what you want to be known for and how you want to show up online. And to my point earlier about the type of content that I typically try to create, I don't my goal hasn't really changed since I went on my own and launched for beta. I'm not out there trying to build pipeline. I like building a personal brand that like sparks dialogue and conversation, and I like challenging perspectives and having mine challenged. And I just see it as a really cool way to connect with people. And so find your why and then build around that. um, I think is really, really, that's advice that I wish I'd heard.
I love that. Um, so we spoke a lot about social media and like what to do, what not to do for brands. You also mentioned the expression or the phrase build pipeline. So how can brands take their social media engagement and turn it into actual conversions and long-term customers? Like something as simple as the fact that you make it easy to connect with you on LinkedIn because you have a button or that's visible, or like you have your email there already so people don't have to work so hard to find you. Like how can we get people, because you said they get to know you through your LinkedIn, they
Yeah.
get to know you because it's not all about your website, right? And they come to you because they want to work with you. So you've made that easy for them by what you share on LinkedIn and how you share it. But also it comes down to how easy it is to reach you, right? So
Yeah.
how do we get them from reading our LinkedIn post or looking at our TikTok video to into the pipeline?
Yeah, great question. This might be more LinkedIn specific, so I'll start here and then zoom out. But I always recommend turning your profile into more of like a landing page. So you said it perfectly. Like give people easy ways to connect with you, learn more. Like if you have the option to use a custom button where you can put in your website, put it in there. Um, on other channels, like make sure you're using like even just that about space, that bio space. Make sure you're using that effectively. Keep it updated. Put the links in that you want people to click on first. Like think about, when we think about social, think about where we want to drive people. If you don't want to drive people to your homepage, you want to drive them to a specific landing page, put the landing page. So I think the customer journey already is very nonlinear and people are already doing a million things at once. So direct them very clearly to where you want them to go and don't leave room for people to get lost or confused. Um, I would also recommend thinking about social as not just a pipeline generator or a lead generator, but also as a way to like customer retention can be huge. So as we talked about earlier, are we looking to educate and inform or to entertain or a mix of both? So creating content that reflects those goals and creates multiple opportunities and multiple touch points for people that are in different stages of the journey, right? Those that haven't converted yet, those that have just found your brand, those that are long-term customers and love your content. Um, I think when we think about the customer journey, a lot of us still see it as just like this very clear process. They're going to see this ad and then this TikTok and then this blog, and then they'll convert. When in reality, they're probably going to scroll online for like 15 days, see different things pop up, click on the site, click off, add to cart, schedule a demo, whatever the case may be. And it's going to be very nonlinear. So, as much as possible, think about social as just a part of this very nonlinear journey and have multiple touch points along the way for people that are at different points in that experience. And then also be realistic about results, like especially depending on your price point and the typical process for conversion. You might not see direct conversions from social. Like you might see your goal might be to drive X amount of traffic per month and then 5x that and 10x that or whatever from social, or to use it more for customer retention. But like conversion might not be as simple as they see this post, click the link in your bio, go and convert. It's really going to depend on what you're optimizing for.
That makes sense. Big emphasis on the nonlinear. Also,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I saw this. Scrolled. 15 days later, what was I looking at? That was cool. Oh, yeah,
Right.
that's really good. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
All
true.
right, so I want to kind of drop a little summary for the people who like just like skip to the end. What I'm hearing from this conversation is it's really easy and tempting to want to emulate these brands on socials, the really big ones, right? That are loud and sassy and are participating in every trend, and they are just extremely visible. But what people aren't seeing is behind the scenes. They probably have people who have researched whether or not these trends are applicable to their brand or their service. They probably have an ICP that is very, very detailed and they know what they're doing. They also won't be as affected if they take a slight hit. I mean, losing a couple hundred followers may not mean that the same to them as it would to someone who's just starting out. And they have the opportunity to be risky, to take those risks. And if that's not your brand, you should not be putting those brands on that same type of pedestal. Everything starts with knowing who you're trying to reach and then going to them. No matter where you want to be, you have to go to where they are and follow them, observe them, and it'll make your life easy, because then you'll be in a state of flow. You're not going to be trying to force things that just aren't there, that just aren't working. So again, I know it's tempting to want to sound like Wendy's, but maybe you sell hammers and you own a hammer store, and maybe showing up sassy is not necessarily going to be what your customer is expecting from you. They just want to know, is the hammer good? Does the hammer well? So just, yeah, personal brand and building a personal voice, emphasis on the personal, because if not, people will see straight through it. And we're also noticing a big trend in people caring more about what happens with the money after you get it. So knowing what your values are as a company, knowing what your morals and values are as a brand is also something you can start incorporating into your messaging, because people do tend to care about that. Am I missing anything, Fran? Anything you want to add to kind of sum this up for the people?
You summed that up perfectly. And I think too, just kind of a mindset thing to remember as well. You mentioned, not putting these brands on a pedestal. Some of the best marketers I know don't work for large brands. They don't have teams of 10 or 15. They're working incredibly hard, and everybody works hard, but they're working hard with like a team of 3, or they're a solo marketer and they're juggling a lot, and they don't have these huge budgets, but they have created incredibly impactful communities within their niche, within their space. And so I think also, if you're not on LinkedIn, I'd recommend getting on there and starting to learn from some of those marketers as well. They're doing really impactful work in areas that a lot of us actually have to live in more realistically, like smaller budgets, leaner teams, things like that. So just an encouragement there. It's okay if you're not the Wendy's of the world. 99.9% of the brands aren't on social.
Yeah. Oh, and I also, yeah, I don't want to forget this either. The importance of finding your platform that you want to focus on and then repurposing where you can so that you don't feel like you're constantly just burnt out and exhausted because you're trying to do so much at the same time. But it is true. Please keep in mind that what works on LinkedIn may not have the same impact or effect on Facebook, for example. So you will need to make some tweaks and changes. It's not just going to be a copy paste situation, but there are ways to kind of make it more efficient for your team or for your social media manager in general. Um,
Yes.
I'm looking to see if we have any major questions in the chat. I see one. Thoughts on tools like HeyGen for social videos? Are you familiar with this platform?
Um, I just looked it up. It's like an AI video generator.
Shrug.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I think it depends on what people's main concern is, like with Midjourney when it first got really big. Like, where are they pulling the AI content from? Um, and are they pulling it from other artists and content creators? Is this being paid for? Things like that. Like, it's just about where it's coming from. That's what I care about. I don't use, I personally haven't used a tool like that. I don't know if you have, but I think that's the main thing that I would consider first is like, how are they sourcing all of the content and information?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, Brandon, is there anything that you want to promote? Where can the people find you? This is just our final goodbye. Where can people stay in touch with you?
I can't believe it's been an hour. Nothing to promote. You can connect with me on LinkedIn at Brianna Doe. I basically live on there. It's all I do. Yeah, would love to connect and let me know what you thought of this because I had a lot of fun.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And you can continue leaving comments on the YouTube video if we have time. I'll try to go in and answer the ones that are left over. But thank you all. And yeah, you can find Brian on LinkedIn. I'm also on LinkedIn too, but I'm not as cool.
Oh my
I'm not as
gosh.
cool on LinkedIn.
You're a lot cooler if we're being for real.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everyone who tuned in. Thank you.
Thank you.